In this module, I'm going to be talking about variables, data types, and math operations that can be performed in a computer program. I'm going to be looking at the different data types that are used in a computer, and then how the variables work in a computer, and then finally how to do assignment operations and perform standard math operations that you can perform in a program. Starting out, a variable in and of itself is going to be an identifier for data that gets entered into a computer program to be operated upon in that program. And every variable is going to be of a defined data type. Up here on the board, I've written out the critical data types that are used in computer programs, which you'll see here that they're broken up into numeric and non-numeric data types. Starting out, your first numeric data type is an integer data type, which integer is going to be any whole number. It could be something like 5, -10, 22, something of that nature. But it's numbers that do not have any decimal places. Then floating point numbers are going to be data type where you can have numbers that can have decimal places, like 1.26, 27.092, something of that nature. Floating points numbers can be used to represent pretty much any real number, whereas integers can only be used just to represent whole numbers. Then crossing down here, our non-numeric data types. First, you could have what's called a character data type. Now, a character data type represents any single character that you would use in a program, which could be a letter, a special character, a number, anything of that nature. So a character could be like A is a character, or it could be a %, that's a character. Or it could be capital G, that's a character. Just any one single character from any of your symbols on the keyboard, whether it be letter, number, or a special character. A string is going to be a series of characters put together to make some sort of word, phrase, or sentence. So like a string would be something like hello. Or it could be like a person's name. Like, for instance, Bob Jones. A string is called a string because it's multiple characters strung together to make up a single variable. Then finally, you have the Boolean data type. Boolean data type is used in conditional operations, and this can only have two values, either true or false. And those are all of your regular data types that you use in computer programming. Now let's talk a little bit about just the two top ones here, the numeric data types. All of your numeric data types support all of your standard algebraic math operations. So let's clear a little bit of the whiteboard space here, and I'll give a few examples. When working with numeric data, you can do any of your ordinary math operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, exponential operations, and perform various types of math functions. But there is some variance between working with integer data versus floating point data. Integers can only be used to represent whole numbers, so you cannot perform any type of math operations where you will produce some sort of fraction. Or, well, if you do that with integers, you'll get results that are leaving off certain parts of the output. For instance, if you do division with integers, you have to deal with how do you get the remainders. But for working with numeric data types, whether you're doing floating point or integer, your standard operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, all will work the same, whether it's an integer or a floating point. But when you get to division, the results will be different. Like, to give an example, and this is going to be floating point versus integer. With floating point, if you do something like 7 divided by 2, the result will be 3.5. But if you do an integer operation, 7 divided by 2 is equal to 3, and then there is a remainder. With integer operations in a computer, there's a separate math operation used to determine the remainder. It is called modulus, represented by a percent sign. And like in this example, 7 mod 2 is going to be equal to 1 because that is the remainder of this operation. 2 divides into 7 3 times with a remainder of 1. So you actually are producing, when you do integer division, you're actually producing two results, the value and the remainder. Computers perform math operations using the standard algebraic form, which means that you're using the regular order of operations that you learn in all of your math classes. So you have at the top, the first thing resolved is going to be parentheses. Then the next thing will be exponents. Next thing will be addition or multiplication and division. And in integer operations, also the modulus right there. And then finally, addition and subtraction. And this is, all of these will resolve exactly the way they do you do in all of your algebra classes. Now, to close out this, let's talk one quick moment about character data types. I mentioned earlier that you have your standard character data type, which represents one single character, and then you also have your string data type, which can be used to represent any type of text that can be displayed. And the strings can be anything from a single word, or it can be a complete sentence, like say, today is Thursday. And then string data types can also hold numeric values. It's just that if you put them in as a string, you cannot perform math operations on them. Like say, for instance, we put in a phone number. And this right here, even though it's numbers here, this is actually considered text data. And of course, in particular with a phone number like we have here, you cannot perform math operations on a phone number, so it doesn't really matter that much anyway. Now, one thing worth pointing out, a string data type can also be a single character. And if a string is a single character, it's basically equivalent to the character data type.